Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. As many as 7,200 Ukrainian service personnel are reportedly missing, and they've been missing since the start of the Russian invasion of the country, so says Ukraine's ombudsman Ole Kotenko. Majority of them, it says, are in Russian captivity. He also said Ukraine's armed forces had earlier reported some 2,000 missing troops, but said the much higher number included members of the National Guard, border guards, and the security service. He hoped that sooner or later they would be exchanged for Russian prisoners of war and returned home. And neither Ukraine's armed forces nor the Russian military have publicly commented on the issue. In the meantime, the death toll from a Russian rocket attack that hit an apartment block in eastern Ukraine over the weekend has risen to 24. Rescuers are still combing through the rubble in search of survivors. Brick by brick, rescuers picked through a huge mound of rubble that remained of a collapsed 5-story block struck late on Saturday in the town of Chasiv Yar in the Donetsk region. We'll tell you about that a bit later. This video posted by Reuters news agency showed rescuers lifting a survivor from the ruins to a stretcher. We'll see that in a moment, carrying away the bodies of 2 people in white bags. At least 9 people have been rescued this morning, according to rescue services. Russia, which invaded Ukraine in what it calls a special military operation, denies targeting civilians in this war. But Russia is also expected to focus the brunt of its assault on eastern Ukraine and the region of Donetsk after claiming the capture of the neighboring Luhansk region. Together, the regions make up the Donbas. One of the survivors in the apartment building that was struck over the weekend is Valentina Popovichuk. She woke up in her apartment early this morning by a cloud of dust falling down on her bed. She then ran to the bathroom, only to find herself under chunks of rubble raining down on her from the floor above. According to her, I saw lights, the headlights of rescuers, and I started screaming, "I'm alive, please get me out." The rescuers entered the hallway, knocked down the door and took me out, she said. Popovichuk was among the lucky ones. She was pulled out alive and uninjured from under the rubble of a partially collapsed building hit by Russian shelling. A few hours after Russian shelling hit the city, 3 people were killed, dozens more wounded. An official from Ukraine's president's office said residential areas have been struck when Russian fired rockets from multiple rocket launchers at the city. Russia, which invaded Ukraine on February 24th, of course, keeps denying it's targeting civilians. We have mentioned 3 people were killed, 31 wounded earlier today after Russian shelling hit the northeastern city of Kharkiv. A city's governor says the city, which is the second largest in Ukraine, that the shelling struck civilian infrastructure as well, including a commercial property and a tire repair shop. Videos have been making the rounds online, showing rescuers removing dead bodies from the balcony of a residential block. There are places which had no military significance, he said, and in the 2 children, aged 4 and 16, are also among the dozens taken to hospital earlier today. Kharkiv is close to the Russian border. It suffered heavy bombardments in the initial phase of the war, followed by a period of relative calm, but it has been shattered in renewed shelling in recent weeks. A shelling also was reported in Bakhmut in the Donetsk region of Ukraine. We'll see fire and smoke billowing from destroyed buildings that have been destroyed by the Russian shellings. Pieces of shrapnel also were seen among bricks scattered on the ground and rubble, as you see there. This video, which we're showing you, cannot be independently verified. But the date and the film and the location of the footage, of course, not also shown. But after Luhansk, Russian forces have been concentrating their attacks on Season, neighboring Donetsk province. Ukraine's general staff said today Russia launched a wave of bombardments as they seek to take Donetsk, the other province in Donbas, which has been partially controlled by Russian-backed separatists since 2014. President Vladimir Putin has been calling the invasion of Ukraine a special military operation to demilitarize neighboring Ukraine and rid it of nationalists. Ukraine and Western allies say Putin's war is an imperial-style land grab and has accused his forces of war crimes. Well, the death toll rose over the weekend after a Russian rocket struck an apartment block in Chasiv Yar in the Donetsk region of Ukraine. 20 more people are feared buried still under the rubble of the one side of the five-story building that was ripped apart by the rockets. But in southern Ukraine, your forces fired missiles at the Russian-occupied city of Kherson. One Ukrainian official said a Russian military base was hit, while Russian reports say a hospital was damaged and a house destroyed. The media in Russia says Kherson's air defense system fired back and 4 explosions were heard in the city.
Authorities said at least 15 people were killed as the Russian rockets hit a 5-story apartment block in the Donetsk region. No fewer than 20 people were feared trapped under the rubble. Chief of Staff to President Zelensky, Andriy Yermak, said on Telegram that the strike was another terrorist attack and that Russia should be designated as a state sponsor of terrorism as a result. A bill to apply this label has been tabled by 2 U.S. senators who expressed their confidence the proposal will be voted through during a Thursday visit to Kyiv. Local officials say Russian rockets damaged the school and a health center for children in Kharkiv, also on Sunday morning. Local residents think Russia targets Ukraine schools on purpose to prevent Ukrainians from learning their own language and culture. Russian forces have been pounding Kharkiv for weeks now, renewing its shelling of the region and the surrounding countryside in what Kyiv says is a bid to force Ukraine to pull resources from the main battlefield in Donbas to protect civilians from attack. Russia denies targeting civilians in its so-called special military operation to demilitarize Ukraine.
We'll be monitoring closely the situation in Ukraine, where also not only the Russia's natural gas supplies to Germany via the Baltic Sea pipeline, the Nord Stream 1, have been halted for 10 days for annual maintenance work. But German Economy Minister Robert Habeck has warned EU countries that they have to be prepared in case gas shipments do not resume. He's accused the Kremlin of using gas as a weapon in response to EU sanctions over the war in Ukraine. Mr. Habeck admitted Germany had become too dependent on Russian gas. He described the situation as grave, a grave political mistake, as we can see today, his words, which we're trying to remedy as quickly as we possibly can. And we'll be revisiting the Russian invasion of Ukraine in just a bit. But a stopover in the UK as the political race heats up. The country is on its way to finding a successor for Boris Johnson. A leader of the opposition Labour Party today said Conservative leadership candidates are behaving as if they just arrived from the moon as they oppose tax rises that they once backed. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss was the latest to enter the race to replace Boris Johnson as Prime Minister today, taking the number of candidates in an increasingly bitter and unpredictable contest to 11. And in his speech, Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, called the Conservative leadership race a chaotic circus. He also questioned how candidates will fund their policy plans, addressing the Conservative Party as infected with a chaos virus, quote from Boris Johnson, and only Labour can deliver for Britain. Let's bring in our London correspondent, Juliana Olaika, who has been following the stories and the politics in the UK. Juliana, we know Prime Minister, well, can we refer to him as Prime Minister Boris Johnson? I guess we can't. I never thought we'd ever be saying this. But there are people in the running for Prime Minister, aren't they? People looking to get in Boris Johnson's job and also becoming leader of the Conservative Party. How many are there now?
Good afternoon, Amarachi. There's only been 2 working days since Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced his resignation after that brutal unseating. And it does appear as if the race to become his successor is going to be even more brutal. There is a little bit of breaking news, which is, I believe, Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, may have also entered the race to become the new Conservative Party leader, which would bring the total up to about 12. Now, the process to find a replacement to become the next tenant of number 10 Downing Street is a little bit convoluted, and it is basically run by the 1922 committee. This is a very influential committee which represents backbenchers of the Conservative Party. Now, they are still meeting at the moment, and we're expecting an announcement from them by about 7 o'clock tonight, basically spelling out what we can expect over the next couple of weeks. And there are 2 important dates. One is September. So by September, we should know who is going to be the next leader of the United Kingdom. And then by July the 21st, these 12, 11 officially, 12 if Priti Patel puts her hat in the ring, they will be whittled down to a final 2 on the 21st of July. And it's then when British Parliament goes on a summer recess. And once they're back from recess, these 2 individuals will go around the country trying to woo the support of the 150,000 paid up Conservative members to win approval and become the next Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Johnson is acting in caretaker capacity at the moment, so lots of people want to see him out. One of them being Labour leader Keir Starmer, who said he needs to leave immediately. I'm sure there are others in the party who are also eager to see him leave office. So what does he do in the meantime? What is his role as caretaker Prime Minister?
Yes, well, I'm not sure if the Prime Minister or the Conservative Party would consider Boris Johnson as a caretaker Prime Minister. He is still the Prime Minister. Yes, he has handed in his resignation, but until his successor is found, he is Prime Minister. If he is ousted before a new leader is confirmed, then there would be a caretaker. But I think over the past couple of days, that notion of whether or not the Prime Minister can stay in number 10 and keep himself out of trouble was kind of, I would say, weighed down. People are not really talking about that much. Of course, yes, we did hear from Sir Keir Starmer earlier today, and he's full of enthusiasm and gusto because he will no longer be investigated by the police. But I think within Tory ranks, they just want Prime Minister Boris Johnson to carry on, which he says he will do. He was speaking a couple of hours ago. This was his first televised interview since that brutal unseating. And, you know, he was talking about his mandate. He was talking about carrying on, focusing on the issues, and there are plenty of issues. You know, let's not forget that we are going through our worst cost of living crisis in a generation, the highest inflation in 40 years. We are going to get GDP figures for the month of May on Wednesday, where it's expected to show that the economy has contracted yet again. There are issues upon issues affecting holidaymakers at airports. And at the moment, it does appear as if we have a government that is paralysed. So I think it's within the best interests of the Conservative Party that the Prime Minister just gets his head done and carried on and stays out of this leadership battle, which is already taking up lots of the column inches in this country at the moment.
Yeah, it does feel odd to be in limbo, doesn't it, for many Britons who feel the Prime Minister should have left already. But there is a very interesting candidate who's also in the running, and that's a candidate of Nigerian origin, Kemi Badenoch. She only came into British politics in 2017, I believe. What are her chances in the race? And she's not the only one who's ever attempted, the only Nigerian person of Nigerian origin who's attempted also running in the race for prime minister. There's also been Chuka Umuna some years ago. He didn't get it. So, but Kemi is being backed right now by former cabinet minister Michael Gove. What are her chances?
Well, it's a good question. She's definitely not a front runner, but she's made history. Kemi Badenoch, a former equalities minister, really rose up the ranks under Prime Minister Boris Johnson's tenure. Yes, she is of Nigerian heritage, but very much British. I've had the pleasure of meeting with her a couple of times. Unfortunately for her, she is a much, I would say, loathed character, which is a shame because she has set a precedent of becoming the first black woman to run as prime minister under a Conservative ticket, the first Nigerian to do so under the Conservatives, which is absolutely fantastic. But as a qualities minister, she seems to have really rattled lots of black Britons here in the UK. I think some of the Twitter abuse or social media abuse that she's received over the past couple of days is absolutely disgusting and shocking. But nevertheless, she is going forward. This is a great opportunity for her. As you said, the fact that Michael Gove, a very senior front bench politician who's been at the forefront of the Conservative Party for over a decade, has backed her chances. That is a really, really great testament to her. But as I said, Amarachi, the process of finding a new Prime Minister is very convoluted. And we are expecting an announcement later today. But because it is so crowded, 11 confirmed candidates, there are some suggestions that the 22 will put up the margins of what you would need to do to run in the first place. So at the moment, to officially be part of the running, you need 8 public votes. I believe Rishi Sunak is in the lead with about 30 endorsements. But if they increase it to 20, which is what we're expecting tonight, then unfortunately Kemi may be out this evening. But you know, she still does have a lot of support. And of course, given that this is a precedent, we do wish her all the best.
Yeah, and I know one of the main issues some of these candidates are putting out there is the issue of taxes, and that's because it is very important to Britons. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says she would reduce taxes, I believe, and that's also what Keir Starmer is also running on. So where do they all stand? How do they fix this within the scheme of things for Britons?
Yeah, this is a really interesting point because I think there are 3 main issues in this leadership race. One is making sure the Conservative government goes forward with Brexit plans, which include ripping up the Northern Ireland Protocol, so stopping the checks on goods that go between the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. I think second of all, they all agree on trying to stamp out illegal migration. I believe each and every single candidate is backing the controversial scheme of sending illegal migrants to Rwanda. And then third, you know, the big one is taxes. And I think that's where the Chancellor is going to find it, or the former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, will find it incredibly difficult because, of course, he imposed all of these taxes, which is very unconservative. I think one of the issues these candidates will have going forward is because they may start promising the electorate more than they can deliver, because we are still trying to get ourselves out of the post-pandemic slump. Inflation is at a 40-year high. Can you afford to decrease taxes while avoid digging into the public purse? And we know that most Conservatives, traditional Conservatives, like to keep the state small. So how can you keep the state small and decrease taxes? I think that is going to be a huge issue. You know, some have suggested that whoever takes on this leadership is, you know, taking a poison chalice. It is not going to be an easy time to be the UK Prime Minister, but nevertheless, there are several people that are vying for the top job.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, you have your hands full, Juliana. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Our observation of politics in the UK continues. We can bring you now Keir Starmer's thoughts on Prime Minister Boris Johnson leaving office. Well, he said Conservative leadership candidates are behaving as if they just arrived from the moon as they oppose tax rises that they once backed. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss was the latest to enter the race. Well, we now know it's Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, to replace Boris Johnson as Prime Minister today, taking the number of candidates to 12. And in his speech earlier, Keir Starmer called the Conservative leadership race a chaotic circus and questioned how candidates will fund their policy plans. He also addressed the Conservative Party as infected with the chaos virus caught from Boris Johnson, and only Labour can deliver for Britain.
Look, I'm glad to see the back of him. I don't think that will come as any surprise, but you know, we've had 12 years of stagnation. Only Labour can reboot our economy and end the cost of living crisis. I can't believe what we're hearing from the candidates to be the next Tory leader. The Tory leadership race hasn't even officially begun yet. But the arms race of fantasy economics is well underway. Over the weekend, the contenders have made more than £200 billion worth of unfunding spending commitments. 200 billion. Let that sink in. That's more than the annual budget of the NHS splurged onto the pages of the Sunday papers without a word on how it'll be paid for. And on taxes, the vast majority of them served in Boris Johnson's government. They went out every day for months and years to defend his behaviour. They backed every one of his 15 tax rises. They're behaving as if they'd just arrived from the moon. They actually nodded along and trooped through the lobbies, voting to support him. Now it turns out they were opposed to them all along. The hypocrisy is nauseating. But let me say here why I think only Labour can deliver for Britain. Whoever emerges from the chaotic circus now being played out in Westminster. And I know you'd expect me to say this, but we're not going to get that from a Conservative Party infected with the chaos virus caught from Boris Johnson.
The UK Labour leader Keir Starmer, outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson, today declined to endorse any of the candidates who are in the race to replace him, saying he would not want to damage their chances. During a visit to Francis Crick Institute, Johnson deflected questions about his personal disappointment at resigning, saying he had to continue to discharge the mandate during his last few weeks in his role. Johnson, who announced his decision to step down on Thursday after a slew of ministerial resignations in protest at his leadership and a scandal-ridden few months, has said he will remain in post until his replacement is chosen. Well, 12 candidates have now launched campaigns to be the next Prime Minister, with Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, being the latest to declare her candidacy. Mr. Johnson said he was sure the outcome will be good and whoever takes over would inherit a great agenda to be continued.
Party decide, let them look. I don't want to say any more about all that. There's a contest underway, and that must happen. And you know, I wouldn't want to damage anybody's chances by offering my support. I just have to get on. I have to get on. And in the last few days and weeks, the job of the constitutional function of the Prime Minister in this situation is to discharge the mandate, to continue to discharge the mandate, and that's what I'm doing. That's not the job of the Prime Minister at this stage. The job of the Prime Minister at this stage is to let the party decide, let them get on with it, and to continue delivering on the projects that we were elected to deliver. Well, I did rate say that. Well, my sister's a wonderful journalist. I think that what I should really concentrate on now, and you're right, I'm doing the last few days, weeks, or however long it is, but the job of government has got to be carried on in that period. I've set out for people what the Tory, the parliamentary party have decided. That has the inevitable consequences that it has. But my job, just in the next few days and weeks, is to continue with the programme on which we were elected.
Let's move over to Sri Lanka now, where fuel prices are at an all-time high today, as shortages in the country hiked up diesel prices to 407 Sri Lankan rupees per litre. Petrol prices touched 500 Sri Lankan rupees per litre, sending locals queuing up outside fuel stations for days. The government has asked people to work from home and close schools in an effort to conserve fuel. Headline inflation in the country of 22 million hit 54.6% last month, and the central bank has warned that it could rise to 70% in the coming months. Thousands of protesters stormed President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's home and office and the Prime Minister's official residence on Saturday as demonstrations over their inability to overcome a devastating economic crisis that erupted into violence.
For 5 days we have to wait for the queue, but they are giving 1,500 rupees for the bikes. That means 3 liters. 3 liters not enough for us. We are working in the courier service. That is only for 1 day it's enough. If you can recommend us to give the full tank, it is better for the bikes. And 3 wheels also 2,500. That is also not enough for them. So if you are doing them to recommend them to give us full tank, it is better for us. We are waiting 3-4 days and we are spending money for morning, breakfast, lunch, dinner, everything. For that, we are not enough 1,500.
Staying in Sri Lanka, the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says he would help achieve an all-party government in accordance with the Constitution. Speaking for the first time since the anti-government protesters stormed his residence and that of the President's and torched his private house over the weekend, Wickremesinghe says people cannot simply pressure Parliament. He's said he would step down to allow an all-party interim government to take over, adding that his aim is to protect the Constitution. The opposition leader, Sajith Premandasa, says the government and its leaders no longer have the people's mandate, and he's ready to form a new government. The crisis-hit nation has barely any dollars left to import fuel, which has been severely rationed to essential services such as buses and trains, and long lines continue outside petrol stations for their futile wait. We're also hearing from President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who's informed Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe he will resign as previously announced, but he'll be set to resign on July 13. After Saturday's sweeping protests in the wake of a debilitating economic crisis, the Speaker of Parliament says Rajapaksa would resign on Wednesday, but there's been no direct word from the President himself on his plans. Rajapaksa and Wickremesinghe are not in their residences, and have not been there since the protesters surged into the buildings and have not been seen in public since then. Their whereabouts remain unknown. The political chaos could complicate efforts to pull the country out of its worst economic crisis in 7 decades, triggered by a severe shortage of foreign currency that has stalled imports of essentials such as food, fuel, and medicine. Well, as expected, people seeking better living and some of the supplies have been trying to leave the country, but and the country's navy has been trying to stop those trying to flee the economically stricken country on a fishing trawler. 78 people were on that means of transportation detected aboard a trawler, as many of them attempted to illegally migrate all the way to Australia. Sri Lanka, as we have been mentioning, is currently suffering its worst economic crisis since independence. People have been attempting to leave the country and long queues can be seen at passport offices. A COVID-19 pandemic hammered the tourism-reliant country and slashed remittances from overseas workers. The financial crisis has been compounded by large and growing government debt, rising oil prices, and a 7-month ban on importing chemical fertilizers last year that damaged farm output. More now on the protesters heading into the presidential palace. Many say they will remain there, occupying until both the president and the prime minister officially resign. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa says he will be resigning on Wednesday. He made that statement through the parliament speaker. He's been blamed for all of the country's economic mismanagement, which has caused shortages of food, fuel and medicine for months. On Sunday morning, the protesters who had made their way into the presidential palace on Saturday roamed through the ransacked establishment. Frustration with the economic crisis had boiled over on Saturday as a huge crowd surged into the presidential palace, some taking the opportunity to frolic in the swimming pool. Amazed ordinary folk took the opportunity to inspect the colonial-era building. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has said through Parliament that he would resign on July 13. The Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe also says he would step down to allow an all-party interim government to take over.
He has already told the Speaker that he will resign on 13th. So we will be here till 13th or 14th to see whether he will resign or not, because we are not we don't trust him anymore, because he has already broken our trust, our country's trust, and he has already sold our country. So we are not in the position to trust him or our Prime Minister at the moment.
And as curious Sri Lankans roam through the presidential palace and the Prime Minister's residence, members of the security forces, some with assault rifles, stand outside the compound but do not stop people from going in. The political chaos could complicate efforts to pull Sri Lanka out of its worst economic crisis in 7 decades, triggered by a severe shortage of foreign currency that has stalled the import of essentials like fuel, food and medicines. The final meltdown after the COVID-19 pandemic hammered the tourism-reliant economy and slashed remittances from overseas workers. It's been compounded by large and growing government debt, rising oil prices, and a 7-month ban on importing chemical fertilizers last year that devastated agriculture. South Africa is still grappling with yet another string of deaths at a drinking bar, this time in the early hours of Sunday in Soweto, Johannesburg. 4 other people were also shot in a bar in Pietermaritzburg in KwaZulu-Natal, but police do not think the incidents are related. This Monday, the police minister, Becky Cele, accompanied by the mayor of Johannesburg and top police officers, visited the grieving community in Ozamo informal settlement. Earlier, we spoke to our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, about the situation there.
Well, we still have basically the same figures that we got on Sunday, where we understand that 15 people officially are dead. A number of people have been treated and discharged. A handful of people are still in critical condition. I think about 8 people have been discharged. We've heard glimpses of what may have happened from survivors. I understand one of the survivors was saying that he was playing pool when these gentlemen came in, and when he heard the first few gunshots, he went under the pool table and he had given up that he would die. But a man at the door wearing black just shot freely into the crowd of people in the tavern. And when he was done, 2 other men, he left, and 2 other men came in and continued firing at the people. So far, from this particular area, the incident here in Nomzamo in Soweto, 15 people killed in the early hours of Sunday. A handful, about 3 or 4, still in critical condition, and about 8 of them have been treated and discharged. At the moment, it's still all speculation. Some are raising ethnic colorations to the attacks. Some are saying probably we have a group of people, the usual suspects, talking about foreign nationals, but nothing official has been said. And we spoke to one of the relatives of the victims, a man who lost 2 people in that incident that happened, and they're asking for justice. Nothing official has been said is the motive. So anything that I get to say to you or you get to hear anywhere else is all speculation. This incident of shooting and all other crimes and the poverty and the unemployment, everyone is reeling from just how difficult things have been, and of course the rolling blackouts, which is folding even more businesses. So people are worried. The case of the 21 teenagers who died, that is yet to be resolved because we don't have an official reason why those young people died, although the last has been buried at the weekend. So we're still waiting for that. And note, this incident is not the only one that happened last weekend. Somewhere else in Johannesburg, 2 or 4 people were killed in a similar circumstance. That was on Friday. And then Saturday, early hours, you still had one in Pietermaritzburg, that's in KwaZulu-Natal, and these are the ones that made the news. That's what some of the witnesses are saying, that these things happen every other day, but some get to make the headlines and some don't. But it's the issue of gun proliferation in the country, in various provinces, Gauteng in particular, is a cause of worry for the officials. And we're here in Nomzamo, where the police minister, the mayor of Johannesburg, the National Police Commissioner are having a town hall meeting, sort of, with the community members. And they've been talking about the issues they have been facing, the issue of crime, the issue of lack of assistance, allegedly, from the police when they get to the police station. Some even threatening to close down the police station themselves if the police minister doesn't do anything about the situation, where you're asked, allegedly, to speak a particular language before you're attended to.
Our South Africa Bureau Chief Betty Dibia. A Senegalese NGO has covered an area of ocean floor with concrete sculpture designed to revive marine life and raise awareness about desertification and plastic pollution. Oceanium, the marine conservation NGO, has placed concrete installations 4 meters below the ocean surface. The plan is for a marine ecosystem to form around the pieces.
The Senegalese NGO is raising awareness about the threats of overfishing and its consequences on marine life with unique underwater art installations off the shores of the country's capital, Dakar. Created by artists Mischa Sanders and Philippi Putzer, the artworks are made of eco-friendly materials, part of an initiative launched in 2021 by the environmental protection NGO Oceanium. The group is calling this latest project Africa's only underwater museum.
The
idea is to put these artworks there, so they are reefs. Marine life will come and cling to these reefs. So we'll have micro seaweeds that will cling to them, fish that will eat these algae, and so on. The fish that was on the rock will move to this art piece, and eventually the fish that was there will move from one concrete installation to another. The bigger the museum gets, the more fish it will attract, and then the more smaller fish it attracts, the more bigger fish will come.
Once among the richest in the world, West Africa's fish stocks are being depleted by industrial trawlers, which comb the oceans to feed the European and Asian markets, according to experts. In Senegal, dwindling stocks pose a threat to livelihood and food security. Some 600,000 people, almost 20% of the workforce, work in fishing, and their hauls account for 75% of the country's animal protein intake, according to 2017 World Bank data. 30-year-old Dakar fisherman Blaise Mbegwe knows this more than most. Every morning when he embarks on his pirogue from the Sumbadelin fishing dock, he never knows what he'll be able to bring back after a day at sea. He says over the years, fish stocks have dwindled, forcing many fishermen like him to travel further to find their catch.
Our government grants a lot of fishing licenses. Where we used to find fish, we now find trawlers. 20 kilometers off our coast, where we used to fish, there are now boats that spread their big nets. The tuna that we used to catch and other species are caught up by the trawlers. We don't have much left. Today we caught 7 kilograms of fish. The fish we went to catch, we sell for 2,000 francs a kilogram, and it weighs 7 kilograms, so we have earned nothing. That's the current situation. Sometimes the profits are big, but there are times like this. Before, we didn't think about immigration because before, we could go to sea and come back with a lot of money. Now it's not possible anymore. We lose more than we gain.
According to a recent study published in the Journal of Fish and Fisheries, around a quarter of all fish caught in the world's ocean each year are used to make fish meal and fish oil rather than food for people. Part of it is used to feed the booming global agriculture industry, which in 2014 harvested 74 million tons of fish, worth an estimated $160 billion, according to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. Potentially adding to the incentives to overfish, fish prices are expected to increase by a further 33% by 2030, as demand is high and supplies are under strain.
When I was a kid, I used to catch fish this big. The first barracuda I caught it here. Today, to see a barracuda, I have to go out to sea, and when I see one, I'm so happy. Whereas before, we used to see them by the hundreds.
According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, around 35% of fisheries are overfished, compared to 10% in 1974.
To the weather now in India's heavy rain in the last 24 hours has flooded many areas of the western Gujarat and Maharashtra states. Floodwaters inundated houses in Valsad city of Gujarat. National Disaster Response Force personnel were deployed to rescue stranded victims in the city. One of them said the situation has been extremely horrific since yesterday because the water level has risen tremendously. Daily commuters in Ahmedabad city were stranded on roads as heavy rain poured down, damaging their vehicles. Extreme weather conditions have hit several areas in the South Asia in the past few weeks during the summer season. While neighboring Pakistan's biggest city, Karachi, has also been flooded as heavy rainfall continues to lash the port city. Moderate to heavy showers over the past week has inundated parts of the city, with water entering homes, shops, and low-lying areas. Intense floods killed dozens of people and left hundreds homeless in Pakistan, according to officials. Heavy monsoon rains have battered the country. In the southern province of Balochistan, 57 people, including women and children, were killed after being swept away in floodwaters. The Disaster Home Affairs advisor to the province's chief minister says 8 dams had burst their banks due to the heavy rains. And back in 2010, the worst floods in memory affected 20 million people in Pakistan, with damaged infrastructure running into billions of dollars and huge swathes of crops destroyed, as 1/5 of the country was inundated. And Chilean authorities have cleaned roads, helping drivers who were trapped by heavy snowstorms in central Chile. This was an eyewitness video. Federal police say close to 250 cars are trapped in the Los Caracoles mountain slope in the Valparaiso region. Videos show police helping to evacuate car and bus drivers trapped in the snow. An army is also helping to clear roads. Police say 4 truck drivers who could not be evacuated were taken to shelters where they had to wait for the weather condition to improve. Just be careful out there, whether in snow or storm. Stay with. And that's it all in the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi.